The hotels you see in back of me now were built within the last 20 years, so it's a safe bet that none of them were built with asbestos. But when I was growing up here, that was not the case. Through the 90s and into the 2000s, many of the hotels on the Strip contained significant amounts of asbestos. In fairness, though, until the mid-1980s, most commercial buildings were built with at least some asbestos products. That's because for decades, asbestos was seen as a miracle mineral that made buildings safer, if you can believe that. Nevada's desert bloomed with new residents in the post-war boom, and it became the fastest-growing state in the country during the 1950s. As a matter of fact, that's when my father first moved to Las Vegas. The houses built here during that era were chock full of asbestos, but that wasn't unique to Las Vegas. What was unique to Las Vegas is the way that Las Vegas revolutionized the hotel, creating an atmosphere where each one was a world unto itself with a theme: castles, or Paris, or New York, or Venice, or the circus, or whatever you're into. Las Vegas invites you to disappear into a world that's a bit like a Disney theme park, but you part with your money a little bit differently here. As the Strip hit its heyday in the 1950s, with singers like Frank Sinatra and Hollywood's news coverage converting illegal gambling into respectable gaming, Las Vegas gave America a new concept of what it was to enjoy yourself. And for some tourists, coming to Las Vegas wasn't as much about the gambling or other vices, but seeing Babylon in the flesh. Part of the allure of Vegas was the incredible light show that graces the Las Vegas Strip, including its iconic sign, built in 1959 by a salesman who sold it to Clark County. Interestingly enough, bending neon involved asbestos papers as well, and in its revolutionary use of neon lights, in hotel signs for Bugsy Siegel's Flamingo or the Pioneer Club's Vegas Vic, a number of sign makers developed asbestos-related diseases as a result. The craft of bending neon tubes into a beautiful structure really was a Las Vegas specialty in many ways, and some of the most iconic signs here were made by the Young Electric Sign Company, also known as Yesco. One of my good friends growing up here worked at Yesco in the 1990s, which thankfully was long past the time that asbestos paper was used in neon signs. Now, neon is giving way to LED, and at some point, neon signs might be just as outdated as asbestos is today. But for now, there's still plenty of neon on the Strip. Some of Las Vegas's most iconic neon signs have been retired and are kept for viewing at the Neon Museum. If you come to Las Vegas, it's worth scheduling a visit to see those signs. In the late 1990s and through the early 2000s, a mass renovation was undertaken to clear the Las Vegas Strip of asbestos. Many of the hotels applied for asbestos abatement permits, but the process was not without some high-profile boondoggles. Now remember, for decades, every building contained some asbestos, and these massive hotels have a lot of hidden spaces in the walls, ducting, and plumbing that were all found to be insulated with asbestos. The Landmark pleaded guilty to improper asbestos exposure violating the Clean Air Act in 1998. The Landmark was torn down many years ago, and Vegas old-timers will fondly remember that it sat next to the Alpine Village Inn, a charming German restaurant that was also torn down many years ago. When I was a teenager, I had a few occasions to visit the abandoned El Rancho Hotel and Casino's grounds. I always wondered what was inside of that shuttered structure, but I never got to go in. A news crew did get to go inside, and guess what they found? A hotbed of rodents and asbestos. The El Rancho was finally demolished in October of 2000. But probably the most colorful example was the Crazy Horse 2, a quote, gentleman's club with a seedy reputation run by Frederick Rick Rizzolo, who some say was the basis for Joe Pesci's character in Martin Scorsese's film Casino. Now, the Crazy Horse 2 was raided by 80 FBI, DEA, and IRS agents for being a mob front. In fact, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and George Clooney were all interviewed by cops in the investigation. Rizzolo pleaded guilty to tax evasion, served time, and paid millions of dollars in fines, though he was allowed to try to sell the club to pay them. It had a middling run under other management, till they discovered Rizzolo had never actually had the asbestos removed, and it too was eventually demolished. Actually, during the 1990s, watching buildings get imploded was kind of like Las Vegas's version of watching car chases in Los Angeles. I was fortunate enough to have a front row seat to some of the implosions here, and I gotta tell you, it was pretty spectacular as a teenager to watch an over-the-top fireworks display while a huge building disappears in a cloud of dust. Teenage me had no idea what asbestos was, but adult me is sitting here right now wondering how much asbestos I breathed when the dunes and the sands were imploded, as both of those former Las Vegas landmarks were also known to have been built with asbestos. But speaking of Las Vegas sands containing asbestos, we started out this episode of Asbestos Rewind by discussing just how far back the contentious affair between asbestos and Las Vegas goes. And it turns out that it goes very far back indeed to the formation of the very rocks that form southern Nevada. And unfortunately, hotel asbestos isn't the only danger to be found in Las Vegas. Let's see what's underneath that rock in part 3.